Hey everyone, it's Brenda back again with another episode of Three Uniques. Today I'm really excited to share with you the next guest that I have on. Her name is Knight Dutkewich.
Perfect.
I
Perfect.
know, I didn't say it right. It's Dutkewich.
It either way. Either I answer to most things. I answer to most things.
I was so excited that I said it right, and I'm like, no, that's not it.
It works. It works.
Okay, so I did a little take two. So, Joe, great to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm really good. Really good. Looking forward to sitting down with you.
Yeah, this is going to be great. So, Joe is a coach. She is all about helping leaders and entrepreneurs get out of their own way. So, what does that mean, Joe? Like, get out of your own way. What's some ways that that happens with leaders and entrepreneurs?
That's a great question, and I get asked this all the time, and I actually ask myself the same question all the time because some people really don't like that as a tagline. They feel as though it's a criticism that we're trying to
Mm,
say it's all your fault, and actually, what I'm trying to say is the absolute opposite. Is that as a human, there are so many things that are going to come against us to stop us being the kind of best version of ourselves and living the life we really want. That one of the things that also comes in the way is kind of our mindset, our history, our flight, fear, and fawn responses.
mhm.
And actually, it's really, really hard to be successful. And to be able to be successful, we have to recognize that naturally we're going to get in our own way. And the way to get out of your own way is not to resist and push back and hate yourself and add sort of shame piles. It's actually to really come from a place of acceptance, love, compassion. And that's really where that tipping point is. A lot of people call it self sabotage. I don't like that. So I think it's really
Mhm.
loaded and quite negative.
Right.
Um, yeah, to be a human, our brain has developed over thousands of years, but it's actually only developed relatively recently to be able to think critically and do all the things we rely on today. Um, and so we're constantly having to push back against that more sort of primitive part of our brain.
Right.
So,
I love
so
that.
yeah, so it's kind of getting out of your own way, recognizing that you're human. What
Mhm.
you're experiencing is a normal part of the human experience. It
Right.
might not be fun all of the time. It's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And how we can just kind of learn to roll with it in a more loving, accepting, human, hot, messy kind of way.
And how did you get into this work? Like helping leaders and entrepreneurs get out of their own way?
So I think my really honest answer is my life has been a really big part of my life. Has been the realization
Hmm.
that I've been in my own way,
Okay.
um, and particularly my brain. I naturally have quite naturally, whatever that means. I naturally have quite high levels of anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, the good side to that is I'm a really good critical thinker. I
Okay.
often tell people I'm not anxious, I'm just highly risk aware.
Right.
And so I'd always been very, very successful
Hmm.
externally, but it always felt like really hard work. I'd always struggled um, to be really comfortable with who I was. I always knew who I was, so it's kind of there was a lot of juxtapositions and inner conflict. And it wasn't until I got to about 30, about
Hmm.
15 years ago, well, if you would even believe that, about 15 years ago, um, that I realized that I was adding an unnecessary layer of suffering to the stuff that was already there. So life was happening, no
Right.
different to anybody else's. And through the way in which I wasn't controlling my thoughts, I was adding another layer of suffering that was making my life much, much more difficult. And why would, and I beat myself up about that for a long time. And I'm 44, for the first, from a cognizance point of view, first 25 years of doing it, I had tried to move past it with sheer hard work and some tough love.
Right.
And it wasn't until I kind of shifted that to loving, compassionate acceptance that I
Mm.
was really able to make progress and to help others do the same. So if I can help anybody to be more of their fabulous selves and suffer less, because so much of the suffering is self-created. And that, I'm not saying, and some of you are going to hear that as a blame thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, there's a, you are responsible for much of your mental suffering. That doesn't mean it's your fault. It just is. It's, you know, your
Right.
brain is actually trying to help. So I work with people to try and help them reduce the suffering that they add on, so that once we've got past that suffering, we can actually get to that core work of what it is we all know, if we're quiet enough, what it is we're supposed to be doing. And so much noise. I often think of myself as just quieting the noise down, um, helping people to quiet down the noise so they can hear who they are and what they want to
Yeah,
do.
no, I love that. And I love the fact that, you even shared your own personal story about, or a snippet of your personal story about, for like 20, 25 years, you
Mm.
just kind of persevered, hacked your way through
Yeah.
it. Even from a productivity standpoint, like how can I just be like, optimizing myself? And then it wasn't until you realized, hey, like, like I can continue to still do it this way,
Mm-hmm.
or I can also, add a dose of love, kindness, and compassion over myself and really, I guess I don't want to use the word attack, but really get to like the underbelly, right?
Absolutely.
Versus
Absolutely.
just approaching it on the surface or even masking it on the surface.
Yes, and I think attack is fine because we're literally, it's like that uncovering. I really
Mhm.
believe it's already there.
Right.
Um, I really do believe we all know who we are. We have to get down and get back to everybody else's opinions, fear,
Hmm.
conditioning, society, gender identity of other people. We have to
Sure.
strip it all back and just get quiet enough to be able to hear who we really are, and then kind of to say it out loud. It's I work with people that are, my age and older, and they will have often never thought of that because we often don't ask those kind of questions in life.
Sure. Yeah.
We get stuck in role rather than purpose.
Yeah. And so, what are some things that you do specifically to make those shifts? Like, what have you noticed in yourself? Like, hey, if I approach my day this way, or if I look at this problem from a different lens of love, kindness, and compassion, what are some things that you do specifically to like help make those shifts for yourself?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, and this is probably what I found the most powerful,
Hmm.
is I assume positive intent,
Okay.
and that is both my own, my amygdala, that kind of primitive part of your brain, and everybody else's. And a lot of so my background is very corporate world, corporate engineering, very very male. So
Okay.
kind of these sort of for me to say these kind of like assume positive intent out loud, that is
Right.
not the environment I'm from.
Yeah, it's embracing more of the feminine side,
It
definitely.
is, it
Yeah.
is. And it's often not what we do. So assume that whatever thought, feeling, action is coming up, assume that somebody's doing their very, very best.
Hmm.
And if that sounds naive, that's okay. Because even if they're not doing their very best, you won't have wasted all that energy, angst, and action
Right.
having to sort of dread it before you come up. So assume positive intent. I do this very much with myself. I used to get very, very conflicted in terms of my thoughts and frustration around my own anxiety. And actually now, I assume that if there is some fear coming up for me, if there's some anxiety coming up for me,
Hmm.
I tried to push back, and I was really quite I wasn't very open to it.
Right.
Now I actually recognize that it's a part of my brain that is trying to keep me alive, is trying to help me, and I say thank you. I actually name my amygdala.
Oh,
Um, I do. I do. I've never said this to you before. I
no.
actually name my amygdala, and I actually encourage my clients to do the same. It's called. She's called Blanche. My amygdala is
Love
called
that.
Blanche.
I love that.
Yes, I know, because who doesn't love a Blanche? You can't ever be cross with anybody called Blanche because they mean well. Um, they're trying to help. They're really trying to help.
Hmm.
But you probably don't want to be listening to them too often.
Okay.
So when if I wanted, so when I was preparing for this, of course you get nervous, thoughts come up, how am I going to look on camera? What do I say? Is anyone
Right.
going to be interested? And I just recognize that it's fear. it's conditioning, it's anxiety, it's the amygdala part of your brain. And I just say, I see you, I hear you, I thank you, Blanche, take a seat. And so that's probably the first thing. Assume
Right.
positive attention is probably
Okay.
the life changing from my point of view.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the
And
second thing is
yeah,
name your amygdala. Name your amygdala.
yeah, I think that's a
Yeah,
really great tip for people versus
love.
calling
Yeah,
amygdala, 'cause I think that is
yes, no,
also,
exactly.
yeah,
And
freaks
love your
people out.
amygdala. Love. Think of them as like a well-meaning aunt that like
Right.
spits on a hanky. I'm like, okay, she means really well. She means really well, but you need to keep away much of the time.
Right.
So,
Okay, I love that. And so next to being a coach and working with leaders and entrepreneurs, you have a farm with like goats and a pig, and you live in a log cabin with your husband and your three boys.
yes, yes. Not quite sure how it happened. Wouldn't describe myself as an animal person. Um, yeah, so it was never supposed to be a farm. It just kind of evolved. Yeah, three boys. We when we first got married, we bought a brand new house, thought it'd be easy, like custom built, and trying to keep the boys in well, trying to keep the boys quiet enough for the neighborhood was just a nightmare. And so
Hmm.
we sort of moved out into the country, bought some acres, and just let them loose. They're feral. Just let them loose. And with them came lots of over the years, just lots of rescued anything that needed a good home, really. So we have, as you said, goats, dogs, pigs, three-legged iguanas,
Three-legged.
three-legged iguanas. Anything that needs a loving space to
Right.
be.
Oh, I love that. And so, Joe, you're here also to share your three uniques with us.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So you can probably tell by the fact we've got three-legged iguana. So
Okay.
my primary unique is empathy. Primary unique is empathy.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll just tell you all three of them and we'll come back to empathy. So
Perfect.
my
Yeah.
primary unique is empathy.
Okay.
And then it is purpose led. I
Hmm.
don't do futile. I'm going to get a t-shirt one day that says don't do futile. And that's been a real theme in my life. We'll come back to that. And then the third one is that I really value self-awareness. Self-awareness.
Okay.
So
Great.
yeah, so the empathy one has
Yeah.
been, I always think of empathy as a gift. And as with any gift, you can over or underuse it.
Hmm.
And again, it's only been in the last 15 years that I've been able to appropriately package and use my empathy. It can get you into trouble. Empathy can get you into trouble. So I tend to call it intelligent empathy these days. Um, so it's okay to take in strays, and we do that in our personal life. In our, we try and help and be everything to everyone.
Right.
And it's not the greatest strategy. It's not the greatest strategy. So kind of empathy with intelligent empathy for me is empathy with boundaries. Yeah, empathy with boundaries, and I had to learn that lesson um, over and over again until I got it about 15 years ago.
No, I can totally appreciate that. I mean, even just, talking on, empathy with boundaries, like boundaries is not something that we're always
No.
taught. And I do believe it's a skill. It's not just,
Mm-hmm.
a way of thinking or something you do in the moment, but to do it well and to preserve relationships, right? I think is the key thing. Because it's really easy just to tell someone no or back
Yes.
off. But that doesn't necessarily bode well, like, if you're in your relationship with your partner or your spouse, right? Like in a loving, kind, like,
Mm-hmm.
respectful relationship, it's, well, we need to get into conversation about it, right?
Yes.
And so I think it's a skill to really be empathetic and to set boundaries.
Absolutely. And I'm all about the ands. I think that's just going back to that your previous question
Hmm.
in terms of what do you do. So assume positive intent. I think the other thing is hold space for the and, replace and with but. I'm all about the ands, the fact that more than one thing is simultaneously true at the same time. So you can be fiercely caring, fiercely want to help, and have some really concrete boundaries and be kind at the same time. So those ands are so important.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And then your second unique?
My second unique is purpose
Purpose.
led,
Yeah.
purpose led. Um,
And what are
Yeah.
some examples of where that should like shown up for you in your life or things that you're even doing now?
Yeah, so I mean, I've literally in the last year, no, that's not true. So in the last 6 years, I kind of redesigned my life completely
Right.
around my three uniques. Even if I wasn't able to articulate them,
Yeah.
I changed my life around them. I'd worked in with big corporations for a long time, and I'd always worked kind of from an improvement point of view, a lot of strategy, a lot of business
Mhm.
improvement, process improvements, product improvement, all those things. And so I'd always needed to work with getting to the why, getting everyone to understand the why and all of that. So for as long as I remember, it's been a huge part of who I am. Um, and then I left my corporate job in 2016.
Mhm.
Um, Again, it felt futile at that point. Didn't feel futile, and I mean that with love. It felt futile in terms of it wasn't allowing me to be the other two parts of who I am. It was very good from a purpose-led point of view, but I wasn't able to be the fiercer kind empath that I am, and also that level of self-awareness was actually making it impossible not to leave because it was
Right.
like so in my face. Um, so I left in 2016, started my own consultancy. Started it very much in terms of what I thought I should be doing,
Hmm.
which was all like corporate leadership development, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I love that stuff. But then in the last year, I've really redesigned my whole business and life around who I really am and getting rid of the side bits. And so my whole program, the program I work with as a coach now, which is called FOURwards, it's the 4 wards of self leadership, and in there it's kind of fears, kindness, self awareness, as high performance habits, and
Right.
also growth mindset. So it's absolutely um, penetrated every part of my life and the way I design my life.
I love
Yeah, it's so loud, I can't not. I mean, and it's always been loud, and I'm an introvert, and it's
that. Right.
always been really loud.
And I love how you shared that like when you're focused on your purpose and you've stripped away all these other things that it becomes lighter for you.
Yes, yes, yes. And again, somebody that is naturally risk averse and a bit anxious, that helps because there is less to, you've got less attachments.
Right.
When you know who you are, you know
Yeah.
what you're supposed to be doing, and you focus on that, and you show up in the world as that, it's freeing. It's absolutely freeing and liberating. And that's what I love, helping other people to be able to do the same.
I love that. And then your third one is you talked about self-awareness.
Yes, yes, self-awareness. Always been very, very self-aware. Again, over from my point of view, first 25 years an overused gift. Because as a I can only speak, I can't speak for a woman, but as a woman, somebody identifies as female, um, anxiety and self-awareness and empathy for others without kindness, compassion, empathy for yourself is a recipe for. I had major eating disorder as a teenager. I
Okay.
had long-term chronic anxiety. I functioned very, very well. I would like to think most people couldn't tell,
Right.
but underneath it was a it was a rough road underneath. Um,
Yeah, it's challenging, I think, for all
it
those
is.
recovering people pleasers out
I
there,
think
like
yes,
myself, I raise my hand fully to that, that to let go of that, and start thinking about yourself first and putting yourself first, or with some of the examples that you gave that I'm sure other listeners can relate to, I can relate to as well, as far as like putting your body first, right? It's like I
absolutely.
will do everything possible, and even now in the roles, the hats that you play, right? Spouse, parent, daughter,
Yeah, business owner.
business
Yeah,
owner,
sister.
coach. Yeah, exactly. All these roles that you play, it's like, where does Joe fit into that? So just even being self-aware about kind of like what you need, what lifts you up, what lights you up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that self-awareness, and that's why part of that forwards program is a lot of, I've always been obsessed with improvements,
Hmm.
and human improvements is only ever possible with self-awareness And if you're looking for improvement with self-awareness without fierce kindness, that is a recipe for unhappiness.
Yeah.
And yeah, so those four pieces, so powerful and so necessary.
And
It just makes it easier. It makes it easier.
yeah, and I love the idea of easy. Sometimes it can be challenging for folks. And so I always say, like just, and I think you're throughout all your three uniques, you've talked about like just a really healthy lesson of like, do it at your own speed, take
Yeah,
the time to like, go through it. You've talked about it in years of work, right? This is not something just to get done by Friday, and not to feel disappointed with yourself too if you're on this journey of self-discovery, that it may not just click for you by Friday. And it takes work, it takes patience.
absolutely. And that's that fierce kindness bit.
Right.
Is this loving? If not, stop. If it's not loving, is it loving to you as well? Because a lot of us, we do what's loving for others, and we
Okay.
sacrifice ourselves
Sure.
for that.
Yeah. No, I can definitely hear that. So what's a habit or a practice that you've recently like developed for yourself that's been like effective for you?
So I didn't plan on sharing this, but one of the thing that's helped me the most in the last year is actually EFT tapping.
Mm,
Um, uh, I've always meditated. I've often done yoga. I like very quiet things. I like loud things occasionally,
right.
driving in a car with some Metallica. Um, so I've always quieted my mind, but I was never able to really calm down my nervous system and limbic system as
Hmm.
well as I have been with some really basic EFT tapping. I tell everybody I was quite skeptical. You really have to. I'm British originally, and I had a lot of judgment about kind of sitting there kind of doing this, and
Right.
I do it everywhere now. I do it.
That's
Do it
great.
everywhere. It's a
Yeah.
really great way to connect your mind, body, and spirit. I just think
Yeah,
it's so
absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then I love asking this question. I haven't asked it for a while, so I'm going to ask you. Be
Okay,
ready.
always.
Not to scare you here, but what's a failure that set you up for success today? Like what's a failure from like your past that set you up for success for today? That's the question.
Gosh, so many, so many. I'm trying to pick one that's not overly personal, not going to upset anybody or ex-husbands. It's probably around boundaries actually.
Hmm.
Probably around boundaries. You can't probably around boundaries. Not setting boundaries, not understanding what a boundary was.
Right.
I don't like conflict naturally. Not I'm sure I can never understand people that do. Knowing that confrontation and conflict are different. um, Being able to understand that boundaries are about us, where we draw our line, and it is none of our business what other people do in response to that. And we can
Right.
still love them, we can still respect them, and we can still not move that line. And again, oldest daughter, firstborn daughter, people pleaser people pleaser beyond. And so, I mean, I think I got sued twice. I got sued twice before I learned about boundaries.
Got it. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I love that. I love that. And like thoughts for the listeners around you coming up with your three uniques. What was some of the things that you like did or discovered about yourself to like, like you said, you prepared for this session or this call today, right? And doing this podcast. What were some of the things that you looked at to kind of come up with, or was it just like, no, I know this about myself clearly? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, so I think the three uniques, I've always known those things about myself.
Hmm.
I think the doing the three uniques program with you, I think the difference has been being able to action it from a place of love and ease. I think, and not and have giving yourself permission to know that those three things are enough,
Right.
and don't compare them to anybody else's. Mine might to other people, purpose led, empathy, and Slow moment, I'm going to forget that. Self-awareness might
Self-awareness.
feel
Yeah.
nebulous to somebody else. And I think for a while I think I was always kind of this very patriarchal kind of wanting them to be more serious or
Mm,
more robust or more kind
right.
of competitive. And that's not me. And that's not me.
Hmm.
Um, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So just being able to, completely, love, accept, and approve of who you really are, and that's who I really am. And how wonderful is that?
It is
Mm,
wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and I usually say this at the end of the podcast, but I'll say it now, and this is for all the listeners. I always wholeheartedly believe this that there's 7.8 billion people on the planet, soon to be 8 billion people on the planet, and we need people that are empathetic, that are purpose-led and self-aware. Not everybody needs to be everything, but like there's room for Joe to be those three things, and there's room for me to be my three uniques, and for everybody else. So it's like I always sort of share the fact that, like somebody needs what you've got. So out of the
absolutely.
7.8 billion people on the planet, somebody needs what you've got. So go out there and share it. And somebody needs somebody else to be a little bit more empathetic today, or to be a little bit more self aware, or be a little bit more purpose led. And they're going to look to you, as well as other people that share the same three uniques as you, to help them lead that and help them learn more about it. So, but if you keep it to yourself, nobody knows, right? And we're not going to necessarily make a difference, right? We're not going to generate something different. We're not going to contribute to something bigger than ourselves if we just keep it to ourselves. So,
Absolutely. And if we don't take that time to question it and claim it and tell ourselves what it is, we
right.
often go through life uh, not who we really are, not our complete selves, not our whole selves, and that's really sad. That's really sad.
Yeah. So, Joe, my last question for you is if I was to give you a billboard and you could put it anywhere on the planet and have
Mm.
anything on it, what would you put on it and where would it be?
Gosh, that's left field. My goodness, the billboards anywhere on the planet. I would want. Okay, maybe I'm going to answer this in my own way.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Go.
so
It's your interview.
yes, I would have it. I would have. I'd have them in schools. I'd have them in schools. So
Nice.
one billboard in all the schools, and it would say something like, "You are, you are enough. You are worthy.
Hmm.
You are loved. It's all going to be okay."
Right.
I'd have that beamed into every young person, everywhere, all of the time. Uh,
Nice.
yes,
Yeah. Just let them like hear it on repeat over and over again,
absolutely,
or read it
absolutely.
on repeat. Yeah.
Yes,
Like when
yes.
their
No,
young minds are forming.
yes, absolutely. Because I think if every adult on this planet knew they were loved, worthy, um, accepted, we would change the world. We would change the world.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe, for being on today, and thanks for coming on to share your three uniques.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
It's been great having you here. And like I promised, at the end of every interview, or at the end of every podcast interview, I always say this, that there's 7.8 billion people on this planet. So get out there and share your three uniques. Somebody needs what you've got. Thanks everyone for
Absolutely.
tuning in today. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.